In this second scenario, we're going to have a look at approving EFT vendor details. Using EFT processing, you can have a separation of duties between users who enter EFT details and users who approve EFT details. And you cannot create EFT files for vendors or customers and employees if the details are not approved. But there are no notifications to the approvers of EFT details awaiting approval. There's no visibility of outstanding approvals. There's no audit trail of who approved what and when, and no way of having configurable rules for who approves which records. But if you add Extender, alerts, notifications, and workflow, then your approvers can receive an email notification. Approvers will have a list of all their actionable items on the web screens or on the Sage desktop, with drill down to the relevant screens. Notifications like EFT vendor status can be automated and displayed on all relevant screens. A full audit trail of who approved what and when is kept. And you've got the ability to have configurable workflow rules, up to 5 levels of approvers or groups of users, and these approvers can either be in parallel or in series. And this is what we're going to have a look at now. Building on the separation of duties in EFT processing, we're going to add Extender alerts and workflow for notifications and full approval process. The approver is going to receive an email notification when the change happens. The approver can then drill down from the Extender web console to the EFT vendor screens to check the details entered and check against the documentation provided. And then we can also review the notes on the AP screens for the vendor status before and after the approval. And also we can see the audit trail of all the approvals done. Susan is logged in the web screens and she receives an email from Anne to create the EFT details for this new vendor, New Look Office Supplies. So she first goes to Accounts Payable to find the vendor number that's been assigned. And sees it's 1590. And we can see that the notes for this particular vendor, which has automatically been tagged by Extender, is saying that the EFT vendor details has not been set yet. So Sue will go across to EFT to enter those details. And copying and pasting from the email. You see it's the ANZ Bank. The BSB number is 012361. And the account number we'll copy across. And we can see that the status is entered. The status needs to be made active prior to an EFT record being created for this vendor. And the note is dynamically changed to show that the EFT details are not active as opposed to do not exist. And Susan can also save away the email message that she received with these details and attach it for document management link. And we can see that we now have this email message with the details attached. But Extender Workflow has been configured for new EFT vendors and amended for EFT vendor details. If the EFT vendor details are new or amended, then Anne needs to approve them all. You could have up to 5 users who need to approve the vendor. So first Anne, then Stephen, then Natalie, etc. Or this could be assigned to groups of users, so anyone in the group could approve. And we could have different rules for different EFT vendors. So perhaps if the country was Australia, then Anne needs to approve. If the country is Hong Kong, then Terence needs to approve. But in our case, Anne will be getting an email notification for all the EFT vendors that need approval. And Anne receives an email saying Susan requests the approval of the new EFT vendor details for vendor 1590. And it's waiting for Anne's approver, and there is only one approver. Logging into Sage 300 as Anne and filtering on the console to only see the EFT records, Anne sees this particular record, that it's a workflow notification for vendor 1590. It was entered by Susan, and it's waiting for her to approve the EFT vendor details. From here, Anne can drill down to look at the AP vendor, the AP vendor activity, or the EFT vendor details. So we'll first look at the EFT vendor details. And Anne can see that the vendor status is not active. She has access to the documents that Susan attached at the time of creating these EFT vendor details and can use that to reference them and check them off. And she can see that the status is entered. But from the workflow console, if needs be, she can drill down into the AP vendor to see how that's been set up, as well as the vendor activity. But if she's happy with these details, she can go ahead and approve. On approval, the status on the EFT vendor will be set to active, and the note will be updated to show that the details are now active. And the workflow instance disappears off the console. So if we go back to EFT processing and have a look at that vendor record, we can still have access to the document that was attached by Susan, and we can see the vendor status is active, as we would if we went to see the AP vendor record, or if we looked at the AP payments or the AP invoices for vendor 1590, we'd see that the status was now active. And in the workflow detail log, we see that for the EFT workflow for new EFT vendors, first Susan entered the record and started the workflow, and then Anne approved the workflow. And if we look at the values, we can see Anne's comment was okay as per email. In summary, the advantages of using Extender for EFT vendor approvals: the approvers get a workflow console, and they have drill down on both the web screens and desktop screens. So the approvers have a list of approvals pending. They don't just need to rely on emails being sent to them. They have a choice of how the notifications are received, either via email or a notification via their Teamwork app. There's more transparency as supporting information is available on both the EFT screens and AP screens at all times. There's a full audit trail of each step of the workflow, so when it was started, who started it, and who approved the steps along the way, with any comments that they make. And you have configurable workflow rules, so who gets to approve which EFT vendors changes, maybe based on country or any other field on the EFT vendor that might drive a different approver.